Welcome to those who are joining us for the first time, and welcome back to those who were with us in February for part one. If you were not with us in February, we set the stage for grading for equity by talking about the foundations upon which our current grading practices are based and how these practices inhibit student growth. They inhibit growth by stifling trust and risk taking on the student's part, and they create an environment where grades are a commodity and a currency that can be used for bargaining. These practices are inaccurate and meaningless, and they demotivate and disempower students. We set the stage for today's conversation, which is going to focus on two of the three pillars of a vision for equitable grading, which is where we want to see our grading systems go. And the two pillars are mathematical accuracy and bias-resistant grading to motivate students. We want our grades to be mathematically accurate. We want them to validly reflect a student's academic performance, and our current practices do not provide for mathematical accuracy. There are two major practices that impact the ability of our grades to be accurate. First, the 0 to 100 scale, and second, averaging. So Therese is going to talk to you about the 0 to 100 scale, and then Carla is going to talk about the problem of averaging grades. So first, there are too many distinctions in the scale that you can't distinguish between. So what is the difference between an 88 and an 87? What's the difference between a 72 and a 74? So like, why is one a C minus and one a C? How would you describe the standard proficiency of students with these two grades? Can you even do that? Starch and Elliott did some research where 147 teachers were asked to evaluate a piece of writing on the 0 to 100 scale. And the paper received 30 different scores ranging from 64 to 98. And not all because of the subjectivity or a variance in the considerations they were using, but also because of the scale itself. There were too many distinctions in the scale. Think about it in estimating the length of a room in inches versus yards. You'll be more accurate if you choose the units with less variance.
One of the other reasons that our grades are not mathematically accurate using the 0 to 100 scale is that our scale is disproportionately weighted toward failure. So if you look at this graphic, you can see this is our typical grading scale. And I've highlighted all of the ways a kid can get an F in red and all of the ways a kid can get a passing grade in green. So as a student, if I look at this, already I'm set up to believe like failure is valued more than success. There are more chances of me failing a class than there are for me to pass it. And that's pretty disheartening, especially when students who have a hard time in school, students who aren't motivated by school. This is certainly not something that is motivating to our students. So 2/3 of our scale is approximately given to failure, which is not something that that we want our kids to feel. And then the last one in our 0 to 100 scale that makes our grades inaccurate is this idea of the zero. So I'm going to combine that with this. No, you're good, Marissa. Go ahead. So if we look at these grades right here, and I just want you to take a minute, it's a rhetorical question, but if these were 3 grades in your student grade book, assuming all the assignments were weighted the same, just kind of take a second. What would you give this student? What do you think their average should be? Rhetorical question. I'm going to guess most of you, maybe a C minus, maybe a D plus. Some of you may have gone as high as a C. So let's look at this student's grade with our 0 to 100 scale. So go ahead to the next slide, Marissa, if you would. So let's put in some averages or some percentage points, for this student. So a B is an 85. That's pretty standard. And let's go ahead and use the 0. So if we put a 0 in for this student and we average these 3 grades up, her average comes out to a 57%. So with that 0, we've dropped her 2 85s or his 2 85%, almost 30 percentage points. just by having that 1 0 in there. Then we talk about that 0 and what does it represent? Does this mean the student knew absolutely nothing on that assignment and had 0 knowledge? Or does this mean the student didn't turn it in? Because if grades are supposed to be representative of what a student knows and their proficiency levels, then the 0 indicates the student knew nothing. Now, based on the other 2 assignments, I'm guessing that's not the case. My prediction would be that the student didn't turn it in. So is that really fair if we put in a 0 to drop the student's grade 30 percentage points because of that one mistake? The other thing a 0 does is for a lot of students, it kind of lets them off the hook. You put a 0 in the grade book, the kid's like, I'm done, I don't have to do it, I've already got the 0, what's the point? Even if you tell them they can turn it in, seeing that score in the grade book often devalues the importance of the work that you're assigning. So we want to make sure and change that. Maybe use an I or a blank space to indicate that a student didn't turn something in as opposed to the 0. All right, so go ahead. So Marissa's already got it. Let's look at it and say, okay, what if we had more grades? Would it have less of an impact? So we've doubled the number of assignments. There are 5 grades here, still all 85s and that 1 0. And now her grade goes up to a 68. So it's still dropping those letter grades, those 85s, almost 20 percentage points. And we're still probably not up to what you would have given the student with the 285s and the F. So something to think about. Doug Reeves describes the 0 as sending somebody to a Siberian labor camp for a parking violation. Does the punishment really fit the crime? The other thing the 0 does is it disempowers our kids, makes them, they're demotivated. They don't want to do the work anymore because there's no recovery for them. All right, so let's talk about the fixes. You want to go ahead and go to the next slide. We have some ideas of things to change in this to make your grades more mathematically accurate and to deal with some of these flaws in the 0 to 100 scale. And the first one is using a minimum grade. So if we use a minimum grade of 50, that makes the F scale equal to every other scale in our grading system. So every other grade is 10 percentage points. If we use a 50 as our minimum grade, that makes our F a 50 to 59, and every scale has equal value. So that's one option. If we look back at the last slide that we just talked about with the 5 grades, if we had put in a 50 instead of a 0 for that student, then her average would have gone up to a 78% C, so from a 65. So is that grade more reflective of the student's knowledge? Rhetorical question. I'll let you just ponder that one. Eliminate the 0. That kind of goes with the minimum grade. Instead of using a 0 for a student who didn't turn something in, use an I, use a blank space until they do. Value the assignments that you're giving your students and that there is an expectation to do them. And use that minimum grade. And then the last one is think about using a 0 to 4 scale. Use that A, B, C, D, or 1, 2, 3, 4 instead of the 0 to 4. It's very popular if you think about our GPAs, SATs, ACTs, bar exams, any of those exams that are in our adult world, none of them use a 0 to 100 scale. You don't score a 92% on an SAT, right? They're all scaled instead. So it makes sense to introduce that to kids at the high school level. All right. And I am going to turn it over to Miss Carla. I know that was fast. You will have some time to discuss this coming up. Who's going to talk to you about the flaw of averaging?
Good morning. Welcome. Again, thank you for being here. So I want to talk about averaging a little bit. And the practice of averaging scores that students earn during a given grading period is probably one that most of us, if not all of us, use. However, there are some issues about the accuracy of that grade representing, again, the student's understanding of the standards or essential learning goals in your class. So averaging a data set that has outliers, really high or low scores, actually produces an inaccurate representation of the data overall. Averaging also does not account for student growth over time. And averaging scores really reflects the advantages and disadvantages of student circumstances. So let's take a little deeper look into this idea of averaging. So on the screen, you see 5 scores for a student, and 91, 92, there's the outlier 40, 94, and a 94. Now, what should the final grade for this student be? As you can see, stay on that one, thank you. As you can see, the mean calculation produces a score of 82%, or I think what most of us would call a B, B minus. The mode, which is the most frequent, actually produces 94%. And the median, which is the middle number in the data set, produces a grade of 92. So both the mode and median calculations resist the effects of the outlier, the 40%. Which calculation now is actually a better representation overall of the data set? Because after all, these 3 things are called measures of central tendency. And again, we're not measuring a robot's arm length or something that's very mechanical. We're measuring student understanding of our learning targets. So which grade actually more accurately represents the preponderance of the evidence of this student's ability or understanding of the standards that you taught them? Question to think about. Lots of rhetorical questions this morning. Okay. Yet there's also a perhaps bigger problem at work here, and that is we applied those mathematical calculations without any regard to when those scores happened in time. What if the 40% occurred in September, the 91 and 92 occurred in November, and the 94 in December? Would you feel differently about which calculation to use? So now you can see on this graph, we have 4 student scores over time. Let's say the standard being measured is writing a persuasive essay. And we have Maria and Jason, who began the semester probably with a knowledge base that allowed them to score very well early in the semester. Perhaps they both attended a middle school that emphasized writing essays, and they learned a great deal at that school about this. Each of them did show growth over the semester and ended with A's. Then you see the scores for Ellis and Tanya, who both scored poorly at the beginning. Perhaps they attended a middle school that covered essay writing, but didn't really emphasize mastery of the concepts. However, with the help of their excellent teacher, they were able to make significant growth throughout the semester, and at the end, they also demonstrated A-level performance. Each of these students started at different places for much different reasons, and they progressed at different rates. But by the end of the semester, all have written a persuasive essay at the A level. If we use the mean to calculate the final grade, or the average, Maria would probably receive an A, Jason would perhaps receive a B, B+, whereas Tanya might receive a D, and Ellis might receive a C. For those 4 students who all demonstrated A-level performance on essay writing, does the idea of averaging produce the grades they deserve? Instead of reflexively averaging performance over time, or even using the mode or median, we should assign the grade that is the most accurate representation of their skill level. Thank you. So Feldman would argue that averaging all grades really reflects the learning trajectory of a student, not that student's achievement. And that when we grade, averaging reveals the advantages and disadvantages of student circumstances more than it does their understanding, again, of our learning targets. I think you went the wrong direction, Marissa. Thank you. So the thing is, it's not just about mathematical accuracy. I mean, for goodness sake, I'm a math teacher. I know the calculations are actually numerically accurate, but what we're talking about here is it an accurate representation of the student's understanding? And that's what we want to give you guys some time now to talk about. So next slide. We're going to place you in some breakout rooms for, I think we decided 8 minutes, and then we'll come back for a little share out. So we're going to give you some time to process these ideas that Teresa and I just kind of threw out at you and have a discussion with your peers. So if you are placed in the breakouts in an odd numbered group, you will be talking about the 0 to 100 scale. And if you're placed in an even numbered group, we want you to discuss the topic of averaging. And each breakout group will record their top 3 responses to the I like, what if, and I wonder prompts. And we've created a Jamboard, so there's a link there. If you have the slideshow open, you can click on that link. Otherwise, I think it's been dropped in the chat. Is that true, ladies? The Jamboard link?
Not yet.
Not yet, but it will be. Okay, so we have 2 Jamboards for each discussion topic. You can post on either one. So for example, if your group's doing 0 to 100 scale, there's 2 slides on the Jamboard. You can place your I like, what if, and I wonder on either one. We just want to remind you to allow for equity of voice in your discussions, and you now have 8 minutes to talk about these things.
Everybody's coming back. It looks like we got most everybody back. I think I noticed Melissa's comment. We needed more than 8 minutes. We feel like the same thing. I just want you guys to know when we're planning this. In normal times, this would not have been an hour session. These sessions would have been probably day-long sessions with lots of conversation and problem solving and ideas. But in this virtual world, that's just really hard to do. So thank you all for having the conversations that you were able to have. And we're just gonna take just a minute to look at some of these ideas on the Jamboard. There was one I wondered if somebody, you don't have to claim it's yours. Let me find the one I liked that I wanted to talk about, but I wanted to pose it as a question to the group. And the sticky note says, I wonder, is it fair to other students not to average in zeros for work not completed by students who don't do the work, or to give I's for work not done, passing a student who doesn't do any work? So I just kind of wanted to put that out there. Somebody put that on the wonder and see what maybe some of your thoughts are on the fairness of averaging in zeros or not averaging in zeros. Anybody have any feedback on that one? Ashley?
I think that they have to do something. I mean, you're giving a kid a grade for doing absolutely nothing. Not saying that they can't turn it in at a later date and earn a grade, but I do think that giving a kid a grade for doing absolutely no work. I mean, I guess an F is an F is an F, but there should be some incentive to do the work, because if they, I don't know, I just feel like there's got to be some incentive to at least try something. I guess if they don't do the work and they continue to not do the work, they're not going to pass the test, so they're going to fail the class. But at the high school level, that matters. But previous to that, middle school, it doesn't. They can continue to pass on. So what's the incentive there?
Okay, thank you for your feedback. And I know there are a ton of hands up. I'm gonna move to one more, just because we have another pillar we want to get to today. And the what if question that's on this slide that says, what if with effort shown, the lowest grade was a 55%? So I don't know who wrote that one, if somebody is willing to share their thoughts on the minimum grade being a 55 instead of a 50. Someone from the group who wrote that one.
That was actually me again.
Wow, out of 38 people, 40 people.
I think the mindset was, if you're giving a kid, if you are going to give a 50 for not doing anything, that the minimum grade, if a kid at least tries, that the lowest that they could get would be a 55%. And that's if they get everything wrong, but you can tell they really did try to do something. That there was some effort. So there is at least a differentiation between a kid who does nothing and a kid who tries.
Got it. I like the idea. All right. I wish I could call on every one of you and we could continue this conversation. But for the sake of time, I'm going to turn it over to Mary, who's going to move us into pillar 2 and the bias that is present in our current grading practices.
All right. Thank you, everyone. And thank you for your incredible comments on the Jamboard. I know there's lots of discussion, as Teresa said, that needs to happen around this. We are at the very introductory stage, and so we have a long road to travel with you for sure. So our pillar 2 is we're going to look at bias-resistant grading. And as Teresa said, and Carla, these are really deep subjects. There's a lot of material here. So Marissa and I chose 2 to focus on today. We are going to take a look at late work and at homework. So as Carla and Teresa explained the mathematics of our current grading and how it promotes inequity, we're going to look at the ways that implicit bias can unconsciously create inequity and maybe some beginning step solutions to that. So we're going to examine those 2 problems with our current grading system, the late work and the homework. So you can see this quote from Joe Feldman that is up on your screen right now. And I'm going to give you just a moment to read that. And we don't like to think of ourselves as having bias, but often we know it can be unconscious. And so we saw in Pillar 1 that grading on the 1 to 100 scale swings students towards failure. And it actually harms those students with maybe a weaker educational background. We like to think that they're all coming in with the same tools, but absolutely, that's not the case. Oh, Marissa, could you go? Thanks. When we reduce our bias in grading, our grades become much more accurate. So likewise, when we interpret behaviors to evaluate and grade a student's academic work, we could be basing that grade in part on our unconscious bias based on a student's race, gender, income, language, or even their special needs. So for instance, if we did this and we assigned a student a long report over a holiday weekend, right? Some of those students can't complete that because they don't have access to the internet. They don't have those supports at home. There's just all kinds of factors that can come into play for that. So we need to just, be sure that we're checking ourselves when we do things like that, even though it seems like the perfect opportunity to make that assignment. All right, next slide, Marissa. So I know Teresa talked about this, and just that quick historical perspective, the Industrial Revolution did lead to our current practice of work being graded, and if late, we assessed penalties. The system did not allow for a student to experience failure, as Carla saw maybe in September, and then by December, they've managed to achieve that and master that standard. And then they can move back up, and they've gained the same knowledge maybe as that student that came in with that high knowledge. This is our capitalist system, and it was built on that grading curve. We needed factory workers, and we needed the cream of the crop, right, to maybe run the factories or do other things. And so they looked for that curve. But now we can move away from that. Thank goodness. So this is just a cute little favorite cartoon of mine, but we want to look at those practices that look at knowledge. What does the student know? And it's really hard, but we want to take out that environment and that behavior. So if you're like me, it's the conundrum. Oh, Marissa, would you go back? Sorry. The conundrum of late work, right? So I am guilty of this, but I know that there are times that I have not done my homework. Maybe in high school, in college, maybe for my master's, and students miss due dates. So standards-based grading takes some of the stress off both the student and the teacher, because we try to develop creative ways to collect homework and maybe provide more opportunities for students to show their knowledge other than just handing in a report. Maybe it could be oral. So just other ways to show us that they have mastered that standard. All right, Marissa, sorry. Okay, so now we want to take a look at that late work. I'm going to focus on this. And Joe Feldman has a quote. He says that he realized it was more important for students to do the work that he assigned than it was to make them conform to his timeline. I know that's hard to think about. If the work was important, it was important whether they did it by the due date or a week later. So meeting deadlines is extremely important. We know that. Otherwise, you're getting all kinds of stuff in at all different times. But that is a soft skill, and that should be separate from their academic content mastery. So late work penalties can also disproportionately affect the most vulnerable of our population. Those kids that are going home and don't have lights at night. Maybe they don't have dinner. I can't work on an empty stomach. And so we are affecting them very much. So likewise, when we incorporate the misbehaviors of those students, those students that get under our skin, we warp the accuracy of the grader to describe student academic performance. Also, I know I'm guilty of this. We may miss that underlying cause. What is it? Is it inaccurate preparation? Is it insufficient supports that the students have? What do they need? Do they need some tutoring? So we should allow late work to be submitted when it is done and punish cheating or copying or any other things the students are doing with non-grade consequences, right? Some other type of consequence that could happen at your school, restorative justice, whatever that is, that can take care of that other portion of it. So sadly, our grading system often perpetuates the achievement and opportunity gaps. It's that capitalist system because our practices may seem neutral, but often promote teacher bias. Practices that do promote this bias are extra credit. Have you asked for a box of Kleenexes and said you're going to assign 10 points of extra credit? Obviously, some kids have the ability to bring that in, and others probably don't even have Kleenexes at home. Penalizing lateness, tardiness, and late work. And if you're a high school teacher and the kids are driving themselves to school, then yes, you definitely, that needs to be dealt with. But does that mean that they haven't met that standard? Should that affect them on an academic level? And then also evaluating student behaviors and including homework in the grade. So what are our fixes for this? Let's see here, sorry. I'm sorry, my slide deck is really slow. So what are our fixes? We can accept that work until the end of the unit. Obviously, there has to be a cutoff. There has to be a point in time when we say it's now or never. So definitely, and then they haven't met that standard, right? They're just not academically prepared to move on. Assign and accept meaningful work. That means that work has to be a rich task that ties to that standard. And then allow them to have multiple ways to show that mastery. Feldman in his book said that teachers who have eliminated timelines are surprised that they not only get more completed work in, but the quality of the work increases. Of course, you will have to put a timeline on accepting work at some point, as we said. This may be at the end of the unit, a few days later, maybe just before a grading period. And there was a teacher actually, I have to brag, but Atrisco Heritage Academy invited Joe Feldman in to talk to their group. And there was a teacher that said that she's doing this, but that her gradebook is very, very messy. And that I think that's the problem. And that's what it would be very hard for me to deal with. I'm sure the same for you, in that we have to deal with that messiness, and it's not an all or nothing process. And then again, I just want you to reiterate that the late work, the consequences are soft skills, and that they should be treated in a non-academic manner. We need to be truth tellers to our students so that we dignify them. If they've mastered a standard, they should have a reflective grade. If they have not, they are not academically prepared to say that they have mastered that or to move on. They will find out later that they are not academically prepared. Certainly if they move on to high school, college, or some kind of higher education, they're definitely going to find out when they hit that wall. But even kids that go out, for instance, my son, who's in the Navy, hated school, but he's now having to take tests and dig deep to get those skills that he probably didn't master in school, and learning them now as an adult. So it does affect all of us. All right, Marissa, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. I am in charge of the homework portion of the session. All right. So each of the things you see on the screen is a reason that we traditionally have assigned homework. So everyone pick 3, And which are the reasons that you have traditionally assigned homework? And then you can put them in no particular order in the chat. And I'm going to give you 30 seconds to do that. We're all riled up. I love it. Okay, so as we can see, there are many different philosophies at play here, and we all have different things that we value and that we use grades for. And part of what we discussed last time was having a common definition of success. And so all of these different messages that we send kids about homework, these were the result of a broad Google search for homework memes. My personal favorites are the Ned Stark, because winter did not even begin well for him, let alone end well for him, and Keenan Thompson, because I love him. And I feel like this is an accurate representation of how homework has been perceived in my classroom. Like, I have this vision of what it's going to be like, and then the kids turn it in and it looks nothing like it. So you can see these are all different reasons. Like, it's too hard. I can look it up. I just want to get done. If you don't do the homework, you won't pass, you know? So let's think about the messages that these communicate to our students, right? If the perceptions are that it's a losing battle and a punishment, or that homework is irrelevant and indecipherable and the chance of success is low, or that the objective is to get done and get points, and that mistakes are forbidden and we're not rooted in a growth mindset, how can we mend these perceptions with our policies? And how do these perceptions affect the relationships between teachers and students? And now, Joe Feldman says there are 7 different benefits of not grading homework, and I just want to talk briefly about 3 of them. The rest of them you can go through in your own study of the book. But first, all of these have to do with student-teacher relationships. And the first one is that students no longer have an incentive to copy. And we've all done this or been party to this or witnessed it. And the thing is we all, of course, we all want to get the points, but the motivation for copying is interpersonal, right? We want one another to be successful. We want to look successful to our teacher and peers. We want relationships. So if you don't grade homework, that incentive is taken away and the relationship grows instead of becomes fake. Second, we no longer double punish students. So giving zeros for homework and then getting marked down on assessments takes points from students twice. So not only is it not mathematically sound, but it doesn't communicate what we want or that we want students to be successful, right? When we take points twice. And finally, our feedback to students is heard and valued. One of our teacher dreamland situations is that we think that as we're sitting at our dining room tables, making comments and grading and calculating every single point in a rubric, that the student is going to look at this rubric we spent 15 minutes on and absorb and apply all of that feedback on the next assignment. But of course, the reality is starkly different. You know, kids look at their grades and then toss the assignment in the trash. But what if there were no grade? There was only feedback. What would that look like? How amazing would that be? So before we send you off into breakout rooms to practice problem solving with an equitable approach, here are some strategies to address the pesky homework and late issue. You can eliminate behavior grades, which we talked about. We can allow multiple ways of showing mastery, right? And this is rooted in those rich tasks. You can do a written product, you can do a visual product, you can do a conversation, right? Accept work until the end of the unit. Mary talked about that. And separating academic and soft skills. And there are tons of rubrics that are out there for this. And you can communicate the connection between behaviors and academic success without including them in the grade. Connect with students over missing work. If students don't turn in an assignment, let them fill out like a late and incomplete work form, which we have an example of, to assess the actual problem. Giving the kid a 0 not only lets them off the hook, but it lets you off the hook too. If all you're doing is slapping a 0 in the grade book, then you're giving the student permission to just keep going with that 0 without addressing the actual issue, whether it's environmental or academic. So in your breakout rooms, you're going to discuss your scenario and your traditional and equitable terms. And I'm going to put the link to the Jamboard in the chat. And the goal is if everyone's going to be sent into a numbered breakout, and then you're going to find that breakout on the Jamboard. There are 20 slides, and I think we're going to have maybe 18 breakouts, 15 breakouts. Here's the link. And here we go. You're going to have 8 minutes.
So Marissa lost her internet, so we're going to sort of
improvise
where we left off. I'm getting there. Let's see here. Okay. Oh, we're at the Power School survey. So we hope that you guys had some good discussions. We were chatting as you guys were off in your discussion groups. The chat is amazing. You have obviously thought very deeply about this, and you are passionate. And so we definitely are going to continue these conversations because this is incredibly important. And so thank you for your real-time chats because they're amazing. So before we go, we wanted to, our time is, we have about 2 minutes left. So to wrap this up, we want to remind you that please take the Power School survey. It will I know, that's crazy. You can put some thoughts down there, but please know that we're also going to continue this conversation. But the business end of it is please take our Power School survey because we do want your feedback. We want to know where you are. And you will get an email from Power School to do that. It is the only survey that you will get, and it is only for this course. So you'll take that for each of the sessions that you attend. All right. We do, you will have a copy of the slide deck. So you're going to get a copy of that things to try. To maybe do some fixes. Remember, beginning steps, start slowly. You don't try to take it all on. And if there's a group that you can work with, that is just so much better. We also have a takeaway document linked in our slide deck so that you'll be able to access some information that way. And grab a buddy, right? Create rich tasks and be brave.
Okay, I think I'm back. Am I back?
All right, so I'll let you, you're back at a very good time because Marissa had sort of arranged this grading for equity, and so she's got some exciting news for you.
Okay, so we have got free access to the entire book on the Gale site. The access code is SCHOOL, and if you just follow the link, you'll be able to get into that, and I think you only have to do that once. All right, refresh that, whoop, that's my script. Never mind, forget that. Good Lord. Sorry, getting kicked off my internet like messed me up. Takeaways. Here we go.
So just go ahead and go through the book. We are at the end of our time.
Okay, so there it is. And next time, if we are going to, next time we have the opportunity to work with the Elena Aguilar people. And they're going to be doing 4 different sessions that are all different. So everybody get your asynchronous tasks ready now for April. Okay, did I get everything?
Marissa, I tried to get into the book with school as the password, and it did not let me in.
Oh, that is strange. Because
Did anybody else get in?
For me.
Yeah, it's all lowercase.
Okay, all lower. I did all
Okay.
capitalized because that's what it was in the slideshow. It's all lowercase, and you got in.
Good to know.
Thank you.
It's because of that font.
Sorry, just a quick question. All of these presentations and resources are all in that March Summit website, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, are we good?
Thank you all for being here today.
So, of course, for my 10 minutes, I lose the internet and they're leaf blowing outside. I think I'm cursed.
I can't hear the leaf blowing.
Okay.
Yeah. It's
Like, of course.
Is this link for another session? Are people coming in for the next session on this or no?
Oh, maybe.
Is this a
No,
separate?
You
They
had your
were all in ours.
Yeah, you had your own session code, right? So I don't think this is a shared code.
Okay.
Yeah, because I made it.